Hi, I'm Melinda Malavos, and I am here to share with you again with the mastermind.com. And I'm here to help you understand. We've been talking about not buying real estate in tragedy. So, one of the things when we're grieving and we're understanding what we're walking through, sometimes it's really hard to understand what options are even available for us once we've been through something like that, right? So, I wanted to be able to share this with you. Sorry, moving around a little bit. Anyway, I put down. I've worked with a lot of people who've had a lot of grief, and I've helped a lot of people overcome and actually find great things out of the grief that they're having. And you can too. It's okay. Um, I want to talk about physical care. When we're walking through grief, it's very difficult for us to see what we have to do, what we might need. When we're in the grief, sometimes days go by and we don't realize, like, we haven't taken a shower, we haven't brushed our teeth, we haven't called a certain person. It's like we kind of just fall apart sometimes, right? Grief is not an easy thing. So I'm going to go over a couple things with you in physical care. The physical self care, we talk about nutrition. Sometimes when we're grieving, we tend to eat a lot of junk food, eat a lot of sugar. We get addicted again to bread. That becomes our best friend. The bread will never leave us. And even if they take the store away, I can still make it, right? And so I know a lot of people don't get their bread away from them. It's like they cannot live without their bread. And part of that is, it seems really funny, but bread breaks down as sugar, and there you have it. So, um, whether you're drinking a lot of Coke or soda, or we want to try to stay healthy, because if you're going up and down already because of the grief and the emotions, it's going to continue to keep you in grief. So I want to really encourage you. If you are grieving and are going through this, I'm going to ask that you give yourself a chance to feel, do, and heal. And by doing that, we try to eat things that are good for us, and because we're not the ones that passed away, right? We may want to be with the ones that passed away, but we still get to live and we still get to make our life ours. So I want to challenge you on that side. Sleep. Um, in the times that I lost people, I don't sleep at all. I have a really hard time sleeping sometimes. And so, what I've done to sleep when I've been grieving, I listen to I put 432 hertz on, or I put like 528 hertz, which is DNA reparation, and I'll fall asleep with that. Or I'll put some Native American flute music on, or something to help me. I used to read before I go to sleep. That helped, because I passed out the minute I opened a book, right? I didn't want to read. But, today, I'm much better at that. So I don't like reading before I go to sleep for obvious reasons. But what I do is I set up a time where I write, and I give myself some time before I go to sleep, so I can let go of feelings and then go to sleep, right? Um, Exercise and water intake. For grief, grief goes into different parts of your body. And as you're going through all the different stages of grief, what's really hard is when you get in between the place of, sorry, dogs, when you get to the place of, you're actually going from, no longer in denial to realizing that you are really angry that that person passed away, or those people passed away, or um, let's say you've been in a domestic violence situation and you're involved in the courts, and then all of a sudden, here comes, the guy that gets away with everything, right? And the courts are trying to catch up to him, and the law's trying to catch up to him. And then he just goes and does what he wants, and he passes away. And you feel left like with all the everything, right? Like you still have to pick up all the pieces. And, for those of you who've been through domestic violence, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. They get away with murder, and you're still left to take care of everything. And it's just a really crappy place to be. I've been there several times, and it was very difficult for me to have to deal with that. But I later found out in that situation that um, I really asked, like, I was so mad and so rageful. I found out that it was destroying my spleen because I was so angry. It was fuming my blood, and it literally affected my spleen, the way it produces my hemoglobin, my placebo, my red and white blood cells, and how I fight my immunity. And then it went to my kidneys and my liver, and it started down. And then I ended up really, really sick, right? And I didn't know this was going on just because of anger. So, and that unstoppable anger that you can't deal with. So I ended up learning how to deal with that. And how was the best way for me to deal with that? I found out, like, oh my gosh, I'm so mad that that happened. He gets away with murder. And then a rabbi told me, don't worry about it. Like, literally, he just met God for what he did to you. And when you really think about those things, we don't think about the spiritual afterlife, right? We don't think about some of these things because some people aren't taught about that unless you come encounter with a Christian or you've had some spiritual encounters in your life. Then you become to understand there's a whole other world out there, right? And so, it made it. At first, I was really mad at Rabbi for, like, why did you have to tell me that? I want him to suffer for all that he did to me and the kids and everything. And then I came to realize, like, oh my gosh, you know what? I can move on now because everything he's done is now being dealt with, and I have nothing to do with it. And then it helped me in the future deal with these kind of things. Not that I wanted to stay in that or continue it, but learn what I could do to get out of that situation. So it's a really important thing to be able to understand that. So, but when we go through that in trauma, we're so exhausted. We don't want to feel like we're exercising or so forth. So I suggest we take a walk in nature so we can feel the fresh air and the beauty around us. We can hear the birds chirping. If you're by a creek, you can take a walk by the creek. And make sure you're taking water in too, because grief gives a lot of toxicity to your system and it lingers in your system. So if you're not actually drinking water, you're not actually releasing it. So as you're walking, and then, if you're having to take medication because of the grief, make sure you're taking it on doses. I don't, you got to take, whether it's melatonin to go to sleep, whether it's, your supplements, just to keep your immunity up. If you're not wanting to take supplements or over the counter or anything, you can do, and I'm not saying this for people who are on medication, have to take medication for bipolar or whatever. I am a doctor, but I'm not a psychiatrist, so you need to follow orders according to them. But as a nutritionist and a lymphologist, we suggest, if you're feeling a little depressed, add a little bit more citrus in your water or your diet. Eat a couple oranges a day or a grapefruit, right? If you're not diabetic. And on diabetic medications, grapefruit is incredible for diabetics. And it's a little bit of cinnamon. So, there's all these amazing things. And, comfort food, like eat it at lunch, have a bigger meal at lunch and then have a salad for dinner, so it doesn't keep you lingering. So, and then also breathing. It's important to breathe. When we start having emotions and start feeling emotions, it's really difficult for us. So sometimes we don't breathe. We just cry cry and cry and cry and don't breathe at all. So it's important to take notice breathing in through your nose, out your mouth. And then you can just sit there and just like get it all out, right? And I've experienced a lot of grief in my life. My childhood was a tragedy. Um, and then it's a constant reminder every time I'm around people with normal things, because I didn't have normal things. And I guess, well, I don't think it's normal. That's maybe the wrong word to say it, but like my family was way different, and I just had a different experience in my life. And so, what normal people would say, I have no experience of that because of my life story. So but I still have to deal with grief, and I still have to face it, and I still have to overcome it and not give myself a disease or give myself a cancer. Grief tends to hang out in your lungs and really affect your lungs. So if you're not breathing right and you're not grieving properly, mucus and um, um, can store up in there and cause pneumonia, or a heavy, heavy cough. And so that's some interesting physical, biological facts of dealing with that. Um, Remember, our goal is to feel vital, balanced, and free from depression and anxiety. Um, let's go on to our lifestyle. Do you have structure in your life? Are you having routine in your life after the grief? How much relaxation are you doing? you know if you're chilling all day long and nothing's happening, um that's a little interesting, right? Here, I'm gonna put this, get on my couch. you know um I can't lay in bed all day long and not get anything done. It's really painful for me. So I have to feel like I'm doing something positive every day, or I'm making headway toward the next thing right every day. It's just really important for me. So, I get to set goals every day. Like this mastermind, like, oh my gosh, it's taking forever, but it's, you know what? It's getting done, right? So I set goals every day to get it done, make sure I have the proper material, make sure I have everything that I need so that I can give the best to you guys, right? So it's important to set goals. And then I have a good feeling inside when I complete and I check one off. So, I have all kinds of notebooks and books, and I just, so maybe that might help you organize a little bit better. Fulfilling work. Sometimes when grief happens, we realize we really don't want to be where we're at. And sometimes when we have grief, it tends to awaken something that matters to us. It tends to open up the soul in an incredible way. So I want to encourage you guys to be able to communicate about that and be honest with yourself and have compassion for yourself and understanding so that you actually can do that, right? Because that's such a blessing that even amidst the tragedy, you have inspiration to get on your life path, that you have inspiration to understand that there's something better happening and you're part of it, right? And you're the common denominator. So what are you going to do now? So that's something really important. And because, you know, we want to have compassion and love for ourselves, we just don't walk off a job. We give them 2 weeks, and we continue to give them our best until we go on, right? Because that way it'll be blessed when we move. So, also, time in nature. I live in a beautiful area in Ventura County, and it has lots of trees and so forth like that. And so I like to be in the park. I like to be around the creek. I like to, hang out. And I've always craved beautiful places because my life was so sad. The beauty helps me stay strong. Being in the sun gives positive vitamin D, which helps with depression and manic depression and so forth like that. And we need the vitamin D. And, we need to be watered. We need to have soil. I like to take my shoes off so I can walk in the soil or in the grass. And, it's really important that we're connected and realize that we're all connected, and there's nothing lacking with that. So, and in that, that brings pleasure, that brings enjoyment, that brings the gift of being able to have complete understanding. Um, it's a really good thing. So, um, pleasure. I really want to kind of talk about this just for a minute, because pleasure is when I feel good, right? But sometimes people, when they're grieving, they're like, well, I lost my mom, so I get the right to beat you up. Or I lost my mom, so I have the right to do this drug. You don't understand how I feel. So, or I had the right to, like self entitled. That's not pleasure, that's manipulation. So I want to make it really clear. Pleasure is like taking a bubble bath and feeling good about it. Pleasure is writing a book. I'm currently working on a book right now with my research partner, who passed away recently. We were on a really important research project with this COVID and rebuilding the immune system and so forth in genetics, and it was breaking stuff. It's very painful when they found him passed away, and so I decided to write a book, and because he was a great professor, taught me everything I knew, and not only that, but he inspired me to be better. And in spite of what I thought, I didn't think I could ever do that. So when it was brought to my attention, like, oh my gosh, I got to look at the way I deal with grief and how I deal with my clients, right? And this pleasure thing came up, and it's like, you know what? No, I'm not just going to release the information in a website that can be shuffled through I don't know how many things. I'm going to publish a book about it and write about his works and dedicate it to him, because he was a great professor, amazing at UCI too. So, it's really important to understand these things. But does it bring me pleasure? Yeah, because his book will be heard, right? His voice will be heard, and the things that he really wanted people to know about will be heard, because he told me those things that he wanted everyone to know. So I get to share his voice. So, that's one way of honoring him, right? So yeah, this is a good thing. Or sometimes, people are like, I had some clients that came, their dad passed away. He had cancer, and the kids, he had 4 kids, and the wife, and they were prepared that his cancer was progressing and so forth, and they were all preparing, but they still weren't able to deal with it when it happened, right? So, um, the wife wouldn't allow herself to feel pleasure because she felt guilty that she was feeling pleasure without him, and that she didn't deserve to be happy because she felt that she was supposed to keep him alive, and in order to keep him alive she had failed him, right? And so I encouraged her to start feeling pleasure. And it went down to getting up in the morning and having oatmeal because that made her feel good, some nice warm oatmeal, and then with some tea, and then getting on with her day at work instead of being flustered because she's running out the door, and just sitting there. And then when she's working, not take herself too seriously, but just give herself a moment, or remember a nice memory when she feels depressed and sad, or have something there that reminds her of how amazing she is and what a great job she did, and that years were added on to her husband's diagnosis, not the cancer, but to his life, because originally they said he wasn't going to make it 5 years, and because of the way she cared for him, he lived longer. So I challenged her to get into her perspective, to flip the script, so called, so that she could have pleasure and know that she did her best and start releasing that, right? She did her best that she knew how. She loved him, she honored him, and today her life is about loving because he would want loved her so much he would want her to be happy. And in turn she was able to share this with the kids, and the kids were older teenagers, so they were like getting ready for prom or whatever in their next thing, and it was a very hard thing. So we worked through that also. And but because of what she learned about pleasure, she was able to share that with them, and they would be able to come together and have a special day. So anytime they sit down for dinner, they went really easy for the kids to sit there and be with dad because they always decided to sit a plate there where dad would be, right? So dad was always there with them, and that was important to the kids, and it brought them pleasure. So, it's little things like this are not crazy, not superstitious. It's just, when you love people and you miss them, even if they're horrible to you, it's still a loss. And this is how we deal with it. I'm going to go on to mental and emotional self care. This is really important. Um, First and foremost, in order to have healthy, positive mental, emotional self care, is that we have to have positive self talk. What does that mean? I could say all day that I'm a scallywag, right? I'm a scallywag and I'll never change from being a scallywag, right? But in reality, I am amazing. I have overcome so much, and I am created for greatness. And because of what I've overcome, I've been able to learn so much, and I'm so excited to learn more, right? The feeling one's feelings. Now, this was really difficult for me because as a woman coming from a powerful family, women don't cry. You deal with it. You do as you say. I mean, you do as you're told, not, and that's it. Um, if you have feelings, you're considered weak. If you have emotions, you're considered crazy. So this was a really hard one for me. So I give myself time to grieve because what you don't deal with, it deals with you. And so I set sometimes, like recently when I feel like crying, I'll set myself a clock and an alarm, and I'll give myself allotted time to do that. Um, I miss like 7 people passed away at one point in my life at the same time, and they were all very close people to me and very important people. And I just felt so crazy. Like, how am I going to deal with all this grief, right? And I ended up going, giving myself a certain amount of time to be able to walk through that and just miss them and think about them. Sometimes I'd eat food that we had together when I cooked for them or were caring for them, or something, right, that would make me remember our relationship or friendship. And and then after that time came and that scheduled a period of time was over, I would allow myself to move on with my life. And sometimes you have to talk to yourself and say, okay, I have to be willing to keep moving forward. I have to not die with them. They would want me to live and be free in that. So they want me to be happy, joyous, and free, right? Um, some people don't want people to be happy, joyous, and free, but they're not the ones that are you, right? You are you, and you're alive, and you're the one dealing with this. So, you got to be really proactive about what you're doing with yourself in this emotional care. Are you blaming yourself for their passing away? Are you actually overcoming it? Are you, what's really happening? And that's something that you really got to figure out too. So, um, and feeling the feelings, it takes time, but it does get better and it does get easier. Positive beliefs. So, there's a lot of beliefs out there um, that are considered okay. but there's not a lot of really good beliefs out there, right? If you really come down to it, everybody has their version of what they took away from religions or whatever, but in reality, like, um, I'll give an example. My parents were of a heavy occult, and they raised us kids in that. When my parents were murdered, I know, right? When my parents were murdered, and I later went on to go to church and get some comfort, um, there were people there that said, "Oh, your parents went to heaven and God loves them." Well, being full blown Satanist, they did not. I happened to be there when they were murdered. It wasn't by choice, but I knew that they were praising Satan all the way to their last limb and their last breath. And so, you know, it made me angry at these people because it felt like it was just a way for them to shut me up from communicating about my feelings about the loss that had happened. And, if you have people around you that are doing that, don't let them do that to you. You have a right to communicate about what's happening. You have a right to walk through your feelings. And just because you feel overwhelmed or crazy about it doesn't mean it's actually overwhelming or crazy, right? It's just sometimes I found that when I walk through something, I have to make everybody comfortable around me in order to be able to deal with it, right? It was like when I was walking through terminal cancer, it was like everybody else around me had to be comfortable with the fact that I was dying, but they all were like, "You're dead already." So I was having to comfort them. And I'm like, "I'm still 6 feet above ground. Like, what are you guys talking about? I'm not even gone yet. I couldn't beat this." Like, "Oh, yeah, you heard the doctor. You're just totally ignorant of what the doctor's saying." I'm like, "I don't care what the doctor's saying. I am gonna beat this." And I was determined. And I ended up in hospice for a year, and because the doctors were insistent that I was gonna die, and I knew I was gonna beat it, but I lost everybody. I had to start my life all over again when I got out of hospice a year later because people didn't know how to deal with me wanting to live when everybody had already seen me die. So, if you're caregiving for people who have an illness or caregiving for people who are really sick and they have a allotted amount of time that the doctors say they're going to pass away, you know, enjoy them while they're living. It was very painful for me to watch people die around me about me because they just let me go. Like it became all about their emotion instead of be attentive to what was really happening with me. So I can take for experience that that would be an incredible thing if you're having a hard time. I know you don't want to get close, or you start pulling away, or these self defense mechanisms that our brain does to avoid pain. Go away now, so you don't have to worry about later. But if you're taking care of your elderly parents, you know what? They gave you everything, so make sure you give them everything, right? It's only the right honorable thing to do. So get a mood journal. It helped me really organize some things. And that was really, really hard at days, but it was so worth it. And it was the best thing that I could have done. Just, I'm always writing, always writing. I feel like this, I got this. And take initiative in your writings to actually grow a little bit more. Um, make a library of all the positive memories that you guys had, so that whenever you feel sad, you can just look up at that. I did a mural board. It was like, well, it was a big cardboard, and I did a mural on the cardboard with all the pictures of us and everything and the goofy things we did and stuff like that. And you know this is really hard when you've actually had some really hard people in your life and that have been, or the passings have been really hard. And I want you to challenge to not see them in pain no more. I want to challenge you to see that they're no longer suffering, and that's a hard thing. So you can no longer suffer, right? And you can set yourself free. But you have to give yourself permission for that, because someone can't come up to you and say, I wish you freedom. They can't do that. They can only wish it, And since they're not a genie and we're not a genie and we're human beings with feelings and thoughts and all these things, it's important to understand that we can give ourselves permission to feel, do, and heal and have a positive memory. Even if it was a bad situation. My parents and that whole situation with my parents, oh my gosh, what a horrible childhood I had. But if I look at it and I give myself a positive memory, the gift is that, you know what, if I didn't have my mom and my dad, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Not because of the abuse and what they raised me in believing, but because I got to choose. And thank God I got to experience the darkness first. I was able to come into the light and understand what the difference was, right? I also got to help other people come out of darkness and into the light. I get to live an incredible life and feel the vibrations of living in a whole sacred way that most people who've never walked through what I've been through can't even fathom. So because of that darkness and willing to walk into the light and see goodness and see God for what he really is, the gift is that I've been able to become free in thousands and thousands of different ways to be able to share goodness. So, even the worst experience can become your best asset. um, Sometimes you have to have psychotherapy. Find a good therapist that you can trust, make sure they're ethical, and make sure that you find someone you can work with. This is very helpful for many, many, many reasons. Family origin of healing. This is really important. Like with me, um I'm the first one out of 80 generations to be free from the occult. I'm the first one out of 80 generations to be free from addiction. I'm the first one out of 80 generations to have an entrepreneur spirit and not be a slave in many forms. I'm the first one out of 80 generations to have the opportunity to do the things that I do today. And so, what that did is change my whole bloodline. Excuse me. That has that just talking about that made me yawn, because it's just more releasing, as I heal, as I feel, and I teach and I grow, more comes out. It always is. So please, if there's a release, that's a release. So I'm not tired. I got plenty of sleep last night, but it sometimes has to release. But the my generations from me on are completely set free from that bondage. So that's a really important thing to understand, that gift that you may be at. And I'm sorry for the loss that you've had, and I'm sorry that you're grieving. It's not fun, but you can make it, and it can be the best thing that ever happened to you if you want it to be. Working through the grief. This is really hard because, again, as we spoke on the last section, it was the stages of grief, right? Where we have denial, then we have denial, we have anger, we barter after that, then we have depression, and then we finally accept it, right? The 5 stages of grief. So we got to allow ourselves to work through it, and it could take anywhere. There's no telling how long it can take. It can take a long time. I don't even know, but you know what you're going through and what you need at those intervals, right? And working with a good therapist can help you really understand those things. So, you know, I have worked with clients before that went through really hard grieving, and they wanted to just medicate themselves through the grief so they didn't have to deal with it. And I really kind of strongly suggest you don't do that, because it's important that you feel, deal, and heal. And if you're have pharmaceuticals to help you avoid those feelings, it's going to be worse later. So because what isn't dealt with ends up dealing with you, right? And changing your life anyway, because our mind, we are subconscious. So it's really important to understand. Let me just move around a little bit. Spiritual self care now. So in spiritual self care, you know, prayer is always helpful. I know before I became a Christian, I was looking for other practices other than my family's masonry to work with and deal with, um, and it was really difficult. But I remember going and chanting with the Buddhists for hours on end, like until I broke and I was able to release. It was good. But now I just pray and I thank God for the opportunity. Meditation. Meditation is amazing. I do it like 4 hours a day. Um, and I meet God. And when I first started learning how to meditate, I couldn't do it because I couldn't focus because I thought it was all in the mind. Then when I started focusing on something like God's goodness, like the purity of the sun's light, the fact that the trees they they glisten and they share so much oxygen and goodness with us, right? In photosynthesis, and I would pick something to focus on, and then it would just take me away. So that's also really good. There's many guided meditations out there, so I suggest you find one and a modality that actually works for you, and you'll have a positive. And you can start 5 minutes if you've never meditated to 10 minutes, and then get to up to 15 and 30. So I wouldn't suggest you do as much as I do right away, because it does take some getting used to. And I've been doing meditation for almost 16 years now. So um, and it's important, to stay intact with your body, be around healthy spiritual people when they do the meditation, no sexual weirdness or anything. Just make sure, in grieving, that you're keeping everything around and you're attentive to awareness, right? Um, a spiritual community, whether that be your church, whether that be your school, whether it be your family, whether it be whoever it would be, that you get the opportunity to have a community that you don't have to worry about being ashamed or feeling guilty if you start feeling some feelings. It's okay. It's okay. And finding purpose and meaning in life after the passing or the grief. And I know that's so hard because, it's like heavy in density, right? And it just, I can't even move. I can't even get out of bed. I can't even um, focus, right? So, how am I going to find purpose and meaning? And that's where we trust our core, because we've survived this long and we've overcome. We can certainly figure out a new way to be, right? um People support, fans, family, a wellness community. um Wellness communities for people with terminal illnesses. They have free groups for people who actually are going through terminal illness, and then have terminal, and then have groups for people caregiving. Um, sometimes churches, they have special grieving groups or so forth, or sometimes you can look on in a paper, or 411 or 211, whatever city you're in, or so forth. You can always find people to help you with the grief. Make sure you have a rabbi or a minister or a pastor, or you have a therapist. A support group of some sort. You know, Sometimes it requires day treatment, so you can have freedom from things, and some time to release the emotions before you have to go back to the caregiving job before they pass, or there's so many different things. And then we sometimes we want to think about what's our community service in the process of how we're going to actually do that, right? So I think that's really important that we understand all these phases, because our goal ultimately with these understanding how to feel, deal, and heal is to feel vital and balanced and free from depression and free from anxiety. So that's really, really important. And that's why I wanted to share this with you today. Um, the other topic I'm going to talk about briefly is overcoming survivor's remorse. And, you know, and setting yourself free from enmeshments. Now, this is something really serious, because if you haven't, survivor's remorse is like, I'm in a group of people that have gone through cancer, right? And at the same group we were at the wellness community, a whole group of us were in group together. They were getting 4, 5, 6 primary cancers, right? Meaning it's not the original cancer they started off with, but it's starting to spread all over in different places and blah, blah. And that was very painful for me to watch. But then I started watching all of them pass away. But I was the youngest and the most aggressive cancer, right? Because I had stage 4 metastatic breast cancer that spread to my brain and my bones, and it was in the inside of my bone marrow versus, say, the outside of my bones. So it caused a lot of really serious issues, and put me in a coma, and then put me in just so many crazy things happened. And so, but I kept living. And then now today, when I have run into some people or friends that I remember from that time, and they remember me, they say, and I said, "Oh, so how's your mom?" Or anything like that. They're like, "Oh, she passed away." And I'm just like, automatically my heart sinks, because I feel so bad that, like, I survived. And it never makes sense either. It's like they have a family and a beautiful life and everything, and she didn't have to go. I almost felt like I should take her place, right? But I am not God. There is a God, and I'm not him. And so I have to respect that. But that survivor's remorse can get really unhealthy when we start taking it out on ourselves, and we start doing negative self-talk, and we start really harming ourselves. I'm really learning how to love me, and not only love me, but value me in a whole incredible way, because of the gift of being able to survive and overcome. Um, You know, One of the things I'm going to share is something very sacred to me. Is, today I decided to forgive. You know, Sometimes that survivor's remorse is very painful. And we end up, when my first husband passed away, it was of natural causes, of course. And I was in shock, and I felt like I deserved it. And I felt like I'd been a bad person, and that's why he left. I know I'm a good woman. I know I take care of my men. I'm a good woman, and I love my men. And if I'm married to you, I give you my complete. So I know now that that wasn't what was happening. But before I did, and this was years back, and it was like 20 years ago. And I ended up meeting somebody at a grieving group, and this person ended up becoming extremely abusive to me. And I ended up in this sick enmeshment with this person. And I'm going to just define an enmeshment. And an enmeshment is, let's define codependency first. Codependency is like a learned conduct, normally that's passed down through generations, and it affects the ability of having a healthy relationship. And so an enmeshment is similar to a codependency, but it's all the personal boundaries all messed up in the relationship, right? And they're all blurred definitions and all blurred boundaries. So it's really, you can say something, well, I'm really not feeling good for that. Well, what the hell does that mean? What do you what do you mean when you say that? And they're like, I just don't feel well. Okay, great. So, and there's just nothing that makes sense actually. So, this person was really hardcore, but when they ended up overdosing on drugs, a part of me was happy that they were finally gone, so I wasn't tortured and abused, but I was still partly, I was really sad that it happened that way and stuff. So when I decided to go through grief counseling and learn what I needed to learn through that, I wrote this one day and I've kept it ever since. And it says, today I've decided to forgive you, not because of you apologized, but because because you acknowledge the pain that you caused me, but because my soul deserves peace. Now, and that's true. Sometimes when we don't have unforgiven, when we have bitterness towards something and we're not forgiving, it's like us drinking the poison, expecting them to die for us. So that's what bitterness and unforgiveness and hurt does. This person used to hover over me, and it was like, and I noticed after when I tried to separate, this person showed up in other groups and was trying to connect with other people. And I was just like, wow. And hovering, if you've never heard of that, hovering is like a manipulative to suck victims back by exhibiting improvement on desirable behavior. They desire to suck you back in just to treat you just like dirt. Um, this happens a lot with older women when they find husbands, and sometimes there's more now to older men when they lose their wives. There's the women in grieving groups and stuff, and they kind of just destroy them because the person who lost the spouse feels guilty or ashamed about the situation. They actually subconsciously feel deserving of the abuse that that person is giving to them, and they accept these are different times, but they won't accept that pick up the phone call and call the cops, right? So if any of you are going through this, there is a way out, and you can say no. And if the person is abusive in doing that, you can report them, and you can ask for help from the facilitators in your life so that you can be away from that manipulation. Um, and even when I did do that and ask for help to get away from this person, then the verbal trickery came about, where the things they did to get me back and say, I've decided to get help. You're right. I'm so sorry. It was an illusion for that person, that they are willing to make it work because they don't have any intentions on really going to counseling. They don't have any intention of anything. These are just sick people that really latch on in a crazy way. So, they've said I decided to go to counseling. I met them out last time. We're broken up, just weird things, you know, this is really a crazy thing to have to deal with, especially after the loss of a friend or a loss of somebody really important to you. And for some of us older people who have lost people, we never wanted to lose the love of our life or anything, and we couldn't imagine our life without them. So to have somebody else come in and try to manipulate or con or all that is just so abusive and just so hard to deal with because we're nice people, and it's hard for us to realize like we don't have boundaries. What's wrong with me? No wonder they left, and it just does this whole thing that's really bad. So I really want to encourage you, if you're going through this and you're a woman or female and you feel like someone has latched onto you for whatever reason, um and you've been trying to get away, but you didn't want to hurt their feelings, you might be with somebody who is not right for you. And I would strongly suggest that you find some avenues to realize, because you know what the reality is you deserve the best life ever, and you deserve the right to feel, deal, and heal. And just because you're grieving doesn't mean that that gives the right for people to come and take advantage of the situation that's been happening. So I really want you to know that you're not alone, and that we're in this together. And the only solution is to step out of the situation, and after a while you'll see that things are at a different light, right? um and you'll never be able to forget the people you lost. They'll always be with you, but cherishing them and honoring them and all the things that you do in your life is a much more incredible way of dealing with the grief and understanding, and that you're not alone in this. um One of the things that really blew me away was the things that said, "Oh, we're so made for each other. I know that if I didn't go through what I went through, I would never be here with you now." And this is a highly manipulative statement that is made. Um, and it tricks you when they say this, because we're longing for that deep connection again, like we had with our significant other, and so forth. But in reality, their thoughts are usually centered around how they're gonna hook up again, or wrench and demand respect. And so this is, we got to be really careful what we're doing with ourselves and how we're doing it. And remember, there is a way out from suffering, and you don't have to be abused. You've gone through enough, and you need to give yourself permission to feel, deal, and heal, and continue overcoming the grief. So I appreciate you taking. I know it's a little bit longer today, but I appreciate you taking the time to hear and walk through this with me. Because I know if my life can be changed and transformed, it can only be much better for you also. So thank you so much. Okay, bye bye.